The ice clanked against the crystal of Marcus's bourbon glass. He stood right in the center of the patio at the Charlotte Country Club, soaking in the glow of the string lights and the undivided attention of 30 wealthy donors. His new fiancée, Courtney, clung to his arm. She was already laughing before he even finished his punchline. People love to pretend she's some kind of saint. Marcus projected his voice. He wanted the whole terrace to hear. But let's be brutally honest. She's a glorified diaper changer. She completely lacks the grit for the real world. That's why she hides in that hospital ward. A few men in tailored suits chuckled politely. Courtney smirked at me over the rim of her martini. I stood near the edge of the balcony. I kept my breathing perfectly slow. I let the warm North Carolina night air brush past my face. Marcus raised his glass high. To the real world. Gentlemen. The champagne glass shattered so hard against the hardwood floor that the entire ballroom-style patio went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that only happens when something deeply unexpected cracks the air wide open. A retired district judge standing near the outdoor bar had dropped his expensive flute. He stared directly at me, his face drained of color. Then, he slowly turned his furious gaze back to Marcus. He knew exactly who Marcus was talking about. I am Dahlia. I am 38 years old, and for the last 14 months, my entire existence has carried a price tag of exactly $150,000. That is the fortune my ex-husband, Marcus, has burned through in legal fees just to take full custody of our 7-year-old daughter, Ivy. Let's get the motive straight. Marcus has zero interest in actually raising a little girl. He wants a political prop. He is preparing a city council run next year. A glossy campaign brochure featuring a devoted single father looks fantastic to voters. It also guarantees he completely avoids paying child support. It is entirely about his public image and his wallet. Because he is the senior administrator at Charlotte General Hospital, and I am a neonatal intensive care nurse in that exact building. He holds the keys to my daily life. He weaponizes the schedule. I work back-to-back night shifts, 14 hours on my feet. A chaotic blur of alarms and charting, followed by a mandated minimum rest. And then, straight back into the ward. He deliberately engineers my exhaustion. His expensive lawyers twist my physical fatigue into legal ammunition. Every time my mother picks Ivy up from school, or every time I fall asleep on the rug while Ivy plays with her wooden blocks, a private investigator notes it down. In the courtroom, they paint me as the erratic, absent mother who cannot handle her own life. He truly expects me to crack under the pressure. He completely underestimates a mother's endurance. The NICU operates on its own gravity. The air smells constantly of sterile iodine and heated plastic. Heart monitors chime in a relentless, mechanical symphony. I spend my nights hovering over plastic incubators, adjusting oxygen tubes on infants who weigh less than a bag of sugar. I press 2 fingers against translucent skin to feel the flutter of a pulse. It drains the life out of you. It also builds an armor of absolute focus. Every time I steady a collapsing infant lung, I think of Ivy's bright laugh. I channel every ounce of my love for my daughter into keeping those fragile babies alive. I swallow the bone-deep fatigue, plaster a calm expression on my face, and do my job. In a ward hovering between life and death, true character reveals itself quickly. A month ago, a man named Raymond became a permanent fixture in the corner of room 4. He is 65, a highly respected district judge in the county. He usually wears custom wool suits even at 3 in the morning. Here, he is just a desperately worried grandfather sitting vigil over a baby born at 26 weeks. While Marcus spent his evenings schmoozing donors at the country club, Raymond sat in a rigid plastic chair. He watched me. He watched me skip my meals to titrate medications. He noticed me catch a seizing infant before the machines even had a chance to sound the alarm. We exchanged very few words. We never needed a grand conversation. He recognized the quiet, brutal grind of keeping people alive. He stared at the dark circles under my eyes, and he witnessed the absolute precision in my hands. He saw the truth. That silent respect from Raymond became my anchor. It gave me the strength to tolerate Marcus's escalating cruelty. I just needed to survive one more week to secure my legal retainer. That is why I agreed to show up at his ridiculous engagement party. I walked into the lion's den willingly, carrying the weight of my daughter's future on my shoulders. I stepped onto the terrace of the country club only because I had to. Yesterday morning, Marcus sent a 2-sentence email. Show up to the engagement party, or I cancel your weekend with Ivy. My lawyer says I have the discretion. It was blatant, documented extortion. I smoothed down the fabric of my simple, off-the-rack black dress and walked straight into the crowd of silk suits and designer gowns. Courtney intercepted me before I even reached the bar. She held a champagne flute in one hand and rested the other on her hip. A diamond the size of a marble caught the patio lights. She looked me up and down. Her upper lip curled in a tiny, practiced sneer. "You actually came," Courtney said. Her voice carried a sugary, venomous tone. "I told Marcus you wouldn't fit in with this crowd. The hospital staff usually prefers cheaper venues. I'm surprised you even found the place." I kept my expression completely blank. I just stared at the massive ring on her finger, then up to her eyes. I offered a flat, polite nod. Nothing else. Let her sit in the silence. Marcus appeared a moment later. He threw his arm around Courtney's waist and guided her toward a cluster of hospital board members, local politicians, and wealthy donors. He made sure I was standing right on the edge of their circle. He wanted an audience for this. He needed me to play the part of the jealous, unhinged ex-wife. He leaned against the polished oak of the outdoor bar. He swirled his bourbon. "We're expanding the East Wing," Marcus announced to a balding man in a tailored suit. "Profit margins are up 12% this quarter. You just have to know exactly where to trim the fat." The balding man chuckled. Trimming the fat, always the hardest part of administration. Marcus turned his head just enough to lock eyes with me. "Not really. You just stop overpaying the low-level staff, the ones who complain about 14-hour shifts while doing nothing but wiping down machines and charting temperatures. They think they run the hospital. But without visionaries securing the funding, they're just doing manual labor wrapped in scrubs. Anyone can do it." A few people in the circle shifted uncomfortably. They glanced between Marcus and me, sensing the heavy, targeted cruelty in his words. 10 years ago, a comment like that would have crushed my chest. Back when we were married, he used to pace around our living room in his expensive suits, calling my nursing shifts a cute little hobby. He used to tell me I lacked the intellectual rigor for real leadership. I used to shrink into the sofa. I used to apologize for being too tired to cook after a grueling shift. He broke me down, piece by piece, until I genuinely believed my daily sacrifices were worthless. Today, my pulse remained entirely steady. I stood perfectly still. The man trying to humiliate me was the same man who once panicked and called an ambulance because our daughter had a slight fever. He was a coward hiding behind an administrative title and a bank account. I am the one who keeps fragile human beings breathing. I hold the line between life and death every single night. He waited for me to snap. He desperately wanted me to raise my voice, to cry, to give his high-priced lawyer proof of my erratic behavior. I lifted my chin. I offered him a small, terribly calm smile. I watched the absolute frustration flash across his face. My silence was a loaded weapon. I was just waiting for the perfect moment to pull the trigger. The shattered crystal lay scattered across the hardwood. The quiet on the patio was absolute. Judge Raymond stepped out from the cluster of stunned donors. He refused to yell. Screaming was unnecessary. Men with true authority prefer quiet precision. He simply walked toward Marcus, his footsteps echoing in the sudden void of the country club. The warm evening breeze bit at my skin. Raymond stopped 3 feet away from the outdoor bar. He looked Marcus up and down. It was a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Trimming the fat," Raymond repeated. His voice was cold, flat, and carried over the entire terrace. "A visionary securing funding. Is that what you call it?" Marcus. Marcus opened his mouth. A desperate, wet sound escaped his throat, but actual words failed him. He recognized the district judge instantly. Everyone in Charlotte knew Raymond. Raymond turned slightly, addressing the tight circle of wealthy politicians, investors, and hospital board members. 3 years ago, a Category 5 hurricane tore through the center of this city. The power grid failed completely. Charlotte General lost emergency backup generators for an entire night. Raymond pointed a single, steady finger right at Marcus's chest. This visionary administrator evacuated himself to a luxury hotel inland. He commandeered a private transport and abandoned his post. He left his own medical staff in the dark as the water rose. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Raymond shifted his gaze to me. The harshness in his eyes instantly melted into profound reverence. "That woman," he gestured toward me, "stayed behind. When the ventilators failed in the NICU, she stood in the pitch-black ward. She stood knee-deep in contaminated floodwater. She manually bagged air into the fragile lungs of 3 premature babies for 14 straight hours. One of those infants was my grandson. She kept him breathing with her bare hands while this coward ran." The air in the room vanished. The high society crowd stared at Marcus, their expressions hardening into absolute contempt. Courtney physically took a step away from him. She dropped her hand from his arm like his tailored suit was suddenly on fire. Marcus's polished confidence evaporated. The color drained out of his face, leaving a sickly, pale, gray mask. Sweat beaded along his hairline and rolled down his temples. He swallowed hard. His throat bobbed as he desperately scanned the disgusted faces of the board members surrounding him. He searched for an ally. He found none. This was my moment. I unclasped my small black purse. My hands were perfectly steady. I pulled out a thick manila envelope and withdrew the finalized custody relinquishment papers. I walked slowly across the patio. The crowd parted for me immediately. Every pair of eyes followed my movement. I stopped right in front of Marcus. I dropped the heavy stack of documents onto the polished oak bar, right next to his half-empty bourbon glass. "Sign it," I said. My voice was a whisper, but in that utterly silent courtyard, it hit like a hammer. Marcus stared blindly at the paper. His chest heaved in shallow, panicked breaths. His hands trembled against the edge of the bar. "You can't do this," he choked out. "Sign it right now," I replied, leaning in a fraction of an inch. "Or I walk into the hospital board meeting tomorrow morning. I will detail exactly how you secured your own private evacuation while infants were suffocating on your watch. I will burn your political campaign to ashes." Marcus looked back at the board members. They offered him nothing but cold, judgmental stares. The political career he craved was bleeding out on the hardwood right next to the shattered glass. He grabbed a pen from the bartender's cup. His hand shook violently as he dragged the black ink across the signature line. He handed over his rights to Ivy. He surrendered completely. At 7 in the morning, my phone buzzed against the nightstand. It was an emergency court summons. Marcus's arrogance had survived the night. Narcissists never know when to accept defeat. Their egos demand the last word. Instead of walking away from the country club in shame, Marcus had immediately called his attorney. He was trying to use his bank account to rewrite reality one last time. The magistrate's hearing room smelled intensely of lemon polish and old paper. Marcus sat at the long wooden table. Courtney was nowhere to be seen. He was flanked by a lawyer in a custom gray suit. Marcus wore a freshly pressed navy blazer, his hair perfectly combed. He was already piecing his delusion back together. The lawyer handed a thick, leather-bound folder to the magistrate. "Your Honor, my client signed that relinquishment under severe, calculated duress," the lawyer stated smoothly. "The mother is completely unhinged. She ambushed a private engagement party, terrorized the guests, and extorted a signature using fabricated slander. We are filing an emergency injunction for immediate full custody pending her psychological evaluation." I sat across from them. My hands rested flat on the table. My pulse remained perfectly steady. Marcus shot me a smug, triumphant look from across the room. He genuinely believed his expensive attorney could bury the truth under a mountain of legal jargon. The magistrate peered over his reading glasses. "Do you have a response to this injunction?" I unzipped my worn tote bag. I bypassed the stacks of legal briefs my own lawyer had prepared over the last year. I pulled out a single, transparent plastic sleeve. I slid it across the polished oak table directly toward the magistrate. There were no complex financial audits in that sleeve. There were no hacked emails or secret audio recordings. It held just two pieces of paper. The top document was a faded internal Charlotte General HR timesheet from 3 years ago, the exact date of the Category 5 hurricane. It clearly displayed Marcus's digital punch-out at 4:12 in the afternoon, hours before the storm even made landfall. Pinned directly behind it was an official disciplinary incident report signed by the former hospital president. The reason for the write-up was typed in bold black ink: unauthorized abandonment of post, endangerment of critical care patients. The second paper in the sleeve was a crisp copy of the governor's medical bravery commendation. It bore my full name. It was dated the exact same week. The magistrate pulled the sleeve closer. He read the timesheet. He read the disciplinary report. He looked at the state commendation. The silence in the room grew completely suffocating. Marcus leaned forward. The smug confidence melted off his face, replaced by raw, naked panic. "Your Honor, that is a confidential internal hospital record. She has no right to possess that. A sympathetic HR clerk slipped it into my permanent file 3 years ago," I said quietly, keeping my eyes locked on Marcus. "A fortunate clerical error, but the signature is undeniably real." The magistrate tapped the papers against the desk. He looked at Marcus, then turned a furious glare toward the expensive attorney. "This emergency injunction is dismissed with prejudice," the magistrate snapped. He reached across his desk and pulled forward the original custody relinquishment Marcus had signed the night before. He slammed his heavy ink stamp onto the page and signed his name with brutal efficiency. "Full physical and legal custody is permanently granted to the mother. We are entirely done here." I stood up. I folded my copy of the custody order and placed it into my bag. Marcus remained frozen in his chair, his mouth slightly open. His political campaign, his pristine public image, and his 14-month reign of terror over my life were officially dead. I turned my back on him and walked out the door. The heavy wood clicked completely shut behind me, sealing him inside his own ruin. The gavel struck the wooden block, and the sharp crack dismantled Marcus's entire reality. Justice operates best in cold, sterile environments, far away from the string lights and expensive bourbon of a country club. The magistrate looked down from his bench and delivered a complete financial and personal ruin. He granted me full physical and legal custody of Ivy, effective immediately. He ordered Marcus to reimburse my legal expenses in full. A cashier's check for exactly $150,000 was mandated within 30 days. That was merely the first domino. The hospital board held an emergency review of the human resources timesheet that same afternoon. They terminated his contract the following Tuesday morning, citing gross negligence and endangerment of critical care patients. They stripped his executive severance package entirely. The local Charlotte political donors withdrew their endorsements overnight. His pristine city council campaign vanished before the lawn signs were even printed. 2 weeks later, Courtney moved out of his penthouse. She took the massive diamond ring with her. The high society crowd that laughed at his cruel jokes completely erased him from their guest lists. The silence he feared most finally swallowed him whole. 6 months passed. The suffocating Charlotte heat finally gave way to a crisp autumn breeze. I walked out to my mailbox on a quiet Tuesday afternoon and found a thick, cream-colored envelope resting at the bottom of the metal box. The handwriting belonged to Marcus. He used his expensive fountain pen, pressing the black ink hard into the heavy paper in a desperate attempt to look refined. I stood on my front porch, letting the wind catch my hair, and read the single page. He wrote about the sacred importance of family bonds. He claimed he acted out of a misguided, overwhelming desire to provide Ivy with a traditional home. He asked for a simple coffee date to discuss forgiveness and moving forward for the sake of our daughter. The manipulation dripped off every perfectly crafted sentence. Years ago, a letter like that would have sent my heart racing. I would have spent days agonizing over the perfect response. Now, my pulse stayed completely flat. I walked into the kitchen, slid the heavy cream paper into the cross-cut shredder, and pressed the heavy plastic button. The machine whirred to life. The steel blades pulled his hollow excuses down into tiny, unreadable strips. I turned my back and started boiling water for tea. My house smells like cinnamon and fresh laundry now. The heavy, suffocating tension that used to cling to the walls is permanently gone. I still work long, grueling shifts in the neonatal intensive care unit. The hospital floors are still hard, and the heart monitors still chime in the dark. But the exhaustion feels entirely different. It feels earned. It belongs to me. On Sunday mornings, my small house is loud in the best possible way. Ivy sits on the living room rug, building massive block towers and laughing at the television. Raymond visits us twice a month. The distinguished district judge trades his custom wool suits for a faded navy cardigan. He brings his grandson, the little boy I kept breathing through the hurricane. We drink dark roast coffee on the front porch while the kids chase each other through the falling autumn leaves. We built a true family out of mutual respect and shared survival. It is a quiet, steady kind of love. It requires no country club memberships, no expensive champagne, and absolutely no audience applause. It just requires showing up when the world goes dark. Sit in the quiet of your own life for a moment and look closely at the people trying to break you. Men like Marcus suffer from the illusion of power of an empty wallet. They fundamentally confuse what they have in material wealth with who they actually are in personal value and character. Narcissists construct entire lives out of volume, wealth, and public praise to drown out their internal panic, mistaking their bank accounts for their humanity. When they look at someone who can stand in the freezing water, in the pitch black, and hold the line, it terrifies them. They try to rewrite history to survive their own crushing guilt. I walked through their fire, and I brought back 3 absolute truths. Rule number 1, cowardice always hides behind authority. The people who abandon their posts when the lights go out are always the loudest ones in the daylight. They use administrative titles, inherited wealth, and expensive suits as armor because they possess absolutely no spine. Do not let their volume confuse your reality. A lion never needs to stand on a table and announce it is a lion. Rule number 2, silence is not weakness, It is a loaded weapon. Society constantly tells us to scream back, to defend our honor, to match their chaotic, toxic energy. Refuse the invitation. Enduring quietly does not mean you are broken. It means you are gathering your ammunition. It means you are waiting for the perfect, undeniable moment to drop the truth. Let them build their paper-thin castles in front of their wealthy friends. Let them boast. Then, strike the foundation. Rule number 3. The best revenge is not destroying them. The best revenge is proving they are entirely irrelevant. Screaming matches fade into the air. Anger consumes the person holding it. Paperwork, factual records, and cold documentation outlive all of it. When you finally walk away, you leave them trapped in the wreckage of their own lies while you go build a beautiful, peaceful life. If you are out there right now, holding your ground while a toxic person tries to rewrite your reality, listen to me carefully. Do not argue with them. Do not beg them to see your worth. Collect your receipts. Do the hard work in the dark. Protect your peace at all costs. And when the time is right, just hand over the truth and walk out the door. Have you ever had to step back and let someone destroy their own lies? Tell me how you found your peace in the comments. I read every single one.